Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Ukraine says it's open to direct talks but wants Russia to submit peace terms first as deadly strikes continue. Trump warns Putin he has 2 weeks to show he's serious or face a different response. Hungry crowds break into a UN food warehouse in central Gaza with 2 reported dead and several injured as aid shortages spark desperation. The WFP warns conditions have spiraled out of control amid blockades, looting and a deepening humanitarian collapse. Manila says Beijing has no right to object to its lawful operations in the South China Sea, rejecting China's claims of sovereignty over the Spratly Islands. Tensions flare as both nations trade sharp words over maritime rights. The Trump administration files an appeal after a US court blocks most of the president's sweeping import tariffs. The move seeks to overturn the May 28th ruling that curbed executive power on trade. Israel marks 600 days since the October the 7th attack as Netanyahu faces global calls to end the war and domestic protests. Ministers link the Gaza campaign to rising anti-Semitism, blasting critics as on the wrong side of history. Elon Musk steps down as a special government employee after helping lead Trump's push to shrink federal bureaucracy. He thanks Trump for the chance to reduce wasteful spending, as he says the Doge mission will continue. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the US will aggressively cancel visas of Chinese students linked to the Communist Party or sensitive fields. The move could shake university funding and tech talent pipelines nationwide. South Koreans turn out in record numbers for early voting ahead of next week's snap presidential election. Frontrunner Lee Jae-myung casts his ballot as the nation seeks stability after Yoon Suk-yeol's failed martial law move. Our top story, we start in the Middle East, where tensions in Gaza are boiling over as humanitarian conditions deteriorate. Gaza's media office says Israeli forces killed several at a newly formed aid site backed by Israel and the United States, with troops opening fire on civilians and seeking food, as reports say. Meanwhile, hospital officials confirm 4 Palestinians died when a United Nations food warehouse was stormed in central Gaza. The United Nations food program stepped up, calling for an urgent scale-up of aid to prevent starvation. Gazan Health Ministry has stated that the Red Cross Field Hospital in Al-Masawi area came under fire. This comes as the same source cites 22 of 38 Gazan hospitals are now out of service. As the crisis deepens, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff shows optimism. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I think that we are on the precipice of sending out a new term sheet that hopefully will be delivered later on today. The President is going to review it, and I have some very good feelings about getting to a long-term resolution, temporary ceasefire, and a long-term resolution, a peaceful resolution of that conflict.
In a separate development, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his forces have killed Mohammed Sinwar, a senior Hamas commander and brother to Yahya Sinwar, a key figure behind the October the 7th attack. We now move over to Europe, where in a major development on the Russia-Ukraine war, US President Donald Trump has appeared to set a 2-week deadline for Vladimir Putin. Trump warned that if Russia is tapping him along, the US response could soon shift. Meanwhile, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced Moscow is ready for a second round of direct talks with Ukraine. The proposed date is June the 2nd, with Istanbul again set to host. Here's what the Russian foreign minister said.
Оперативно разработала соответствующий меморандум, который излагает нашу позицию по всем аспектам надежного преодоления первопричин кризиса. Наша делегация во главе с Владимиром Мединским готова представить этот меморандум делегации Украины и дать необходимые пояснения в ходе второго раунда возобновленных прямых переговоров в Стамбуле в ближайший понедельник, 2 июня. Хотел бы вновь выразить признательность турецким партнерам за предоставление гостеприимной турецкой площадки, как вчера подтвердил в ходе своего визита в Москву министр иностранных дел Турции.
The Russian diplomat briefed US Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Moscow's preparation for talks with Ukraine. Lavrov added that Russia has prepared a detailed peace memorandum addressing the root causes of the conflict. However, Russia insists the document will only be shared with Ukraine, rejecting any US or third-party mediation in the exchange. Kiev also says it's open to negotiations but wants Moscow's peace terms in advance. Ukraine's defense minister says they're still waiting to receive Russia's proposal ahead of the scheduled meeting. Ukraine has not yet confirmed its participation in the proposed June the 2nd talks in Istanbul. In a related development, the Kremlin has condemned German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's decision to have Germany and Ukraine develop the joint production of long-range missiles and said that it was nothing but a further provocation of the war in Ukraine. Russian spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said he hoped that despite such provocative moves and all the obstacles, the peace process will continue. And another round of talks between Russia and Ukraine will take place. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov have also said that Germany's plans to jointly develop long-range missiles with Ukraine showed that it was already a participant in the Ukraine war. This comes after German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said his government would not impose any range limits on the missiles which could be produced in Ukraine and Germany during the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to Berlin. The defense ministers of Ukraine and Germany have signed a memorandum which includes direct German investment in Ukraine's defense industry and broader agreement between Ukraine and German arms manufacturers. Lavrov has also said that Berlin's decisions were building tension and added that he hoped responsible politicians in Germany would make the right conclusion and stop the, quote, madness, unquote. Meanwhile, Germany has also announced that it will continue to back Ukraine with a package worth around €5 billion. Zelensky has thanked the Chancellor for the missile production in Ukraine and the aid package. Germany's new Foreign Minister, Johann Wadeful, met his US counterpart, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, for an inaugural visit in Washington. Wadeful pushed back against Russian accusations that German support for the construction of Ukrainian land-based missiles is warmongering. We're now joined by Glenn Grant, who's an ex-advisor to Ukrainian Defense Minister, who's in Riga, Latvia. Thank you very much, Glenn, for joining us on the program. I want to start with the diplomacy that's currently going on. We see once again a repeated statement on Donald Trump's Truth Social, accusing of possibly of Putin tapping him along. Donald Trump has now been outspoken about Vladimir Putin multiple times now, but yet not much action coming to fruition. Where do you think Donald Trump lies in the current state of the Ukraine and Russia conflict?
I think this is quite complex because clearly Donald Trump is on the side of Russia. I don't care what anybody says. Everything he does supports Russia and supports Putin. He loves Putin. He's made that clear over the last 10 years, time and time again, that he thinks Putin's wonderful. So I think that what Trump is doing is sort of pushing Putin to at least agree that something has to be done. But Trump doesn't want to anger Putin and clearly doesn't want to use sanctions at the moment. So if there is a 2-week deadline, as many people are trying to say, I don't believe it personally, but if there is a 2-week deadline, and Trump talks himself into a deadline, then he's almost got to do something. Otherwise, he completely loses face internationally.
How have you analysed Donald Trump's mediation efforts? I mean, he said 24 hours was his time before the presidency, and now we've seen over 120 days in office now from Donald Trump. He's going on and saying that he wants people to stop dying, yet when these big civilian strikes happened and there's multiple civilian fatalities, we see a lack of action. We sometimes think that he possibly might be going back to Ukraine. The highlight of that was the meeting at the Vatican, but yet no cigar when it came to actual movements towards Ukraine. Glenn, what have you got hopes for these direct talks between Russia and Ukraine, possibly happening on June the 2nd in Istanbul? Obviously, we saw a 1,000 person prisoner swap previously, but what are your thoughts that could come out of them?
Personally, I don't see any real change because what Lavrov and Medvedchuk and Putin have been saying, they've actually been basically hardening their line against Ukraine, and what they're looking for is capitulation from Ukraine or just continuing delay so that the war goes on and Russia gets more and more ground away from Ukraine. I mean, as we've seen recently, they're now stacking up their troops on the borderline between Sumy and Kharkiv, and in both places they've started taking ground towards those two major cities. So I don't think Russia has any intention whatsoever of giving any single thing they can to Ukraine. This is either capitulation of Ukraine or the war continues.
Glenn, thank you so much for joining us on the programme. We now move over to some breaking news where Israel's far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has announced the creation of 22 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, a move widely condemned as illegal under international law. In a statement on social media, Smotrich called it a historic decision that would renew settlements in northern Samaria and strengthen Israel's eastern axis. The West Bank, referred to by Israel as Judea and Samaria, has been under Israeli occupation since 1967. We move back to Europe, where a glacier collapse in the Swiss Alps has buried most of the mountain village of Blatten under mud, rock and ice. The disaster occurred when a large section of the Birch Glacier broke off, triggering a massive landslide. The village has been evacuated earlier this month due to warnings of an imminent rockslide, but one person remains missing. Around 90% of Blatten is covered in debris, with homes and infrastructure destroyed. Experts say while it is difficult to determine the exact role of climate change, warmer temperatures have likely contributed by weakening the mountain's permafrost, which holds the rock together. The Swiss government has called in emergency services and urged people to stay away from the hazardous area. This event marks an unprecedented level of destruction in the Swiss Alps. Mayor Matthias Ballwald has held a press conference. Let's listen in what he had to say.
Liebe Blattner, das Unvorstellbare ist heute getroffen. Wir haben praktisch das Dorf, das sichtbare Dorf, verloren. Ich bin froh, haben wir eine Walle, können von Blatten daraus evakuieren und in Sicherheit bringen. Das gibt die Stichkraft, das zu machen, was vor uns liegt. Wir haben das Dorf heute verloren, aber nicht das Herz.
Moving on once again, 7 people, including 4 women and 3 girls, have died after a migrant boat capsized near Restiga harbour on an island in Spain's Canary Islands. The The boat, carrying approximately 150 individuals, overturned as it approached the dock. Witnesses reported that the movement of passengers on board caused the vessel to tip. Emergency responders, along with local volunteers, swiftly intervened to rescue survivors. Among the survivors, 2 children aged 3 and 5 remain in critical condition and have been airlifted to hospital in Tenerife. A 3-month-old infant experiencing breathing difficulties was also hospitalized. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez expressed his condolences, emphasizing the humanitarian crisis faced by migrants seeking a better life. This incident underscores the perilous nature of the Atlantic route to the Canary Islands, which continues to be a deadly path for migrants. We move now to North America, where 6 Mexican soldiers have been killed after triggering an improvised explosive device in the violence hit state of Michoacan. The blast destroyed their armored vehicle while on patrol near the border with Jalisco, a region plagued by brutal conflicts between drug cartels. The incident marks the deadliest single attack on the military involving an IED in recent memory. President Claudia Sheinbaum called the deaths deplorable and vowed justice. Mexico's military has already found over 600 IEDs this year alone in Michoacan, as cartels increasingly turn to landmines and drone bombs to control territory. Authorities have launched a full investigation and a sweep for more devices is underway. Criminal violence, most of it linked to drug trafficking, has claimed around 480,000 lives in Mexico since 2006 and left more than 120,000 people missing. Let's move north to Canada now, where Manitoba has declared a state of emergency and urged more than 17,000 people in northern and eastern parts of the province to evacuate as wildfires spread in central and western Canada. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew has said people needed to move quickly, including from the city of Flin-Flon, and that many people will be put up at soccer fields and community centres in Winnipeg and other cities. He also shared that federal armed forces were on their way to help transport evacuees. The climate crisis has made wildfires in Canada much more frequent and intense. The country has been hit with devastating fires in recent years, including in 2023, the most destructive on record. There are now reportedly 134 active fires across Canada, including in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba and Ontario. Half are considered out of control. We move to the US now, where the day 11 of Sean Diddy Coombs' trial saw shocking testimony from his former stylist, Deontay Nash. Nash told the court he witnessed Coombs violently attacking ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura on several occasions. In one incident, Coombs beat Ventura so badly she needed stitches after hitting her head on a bed frame. Nash also revealed that Coombs allegedly threatened to release sex tapes of Ventura during drug-fueled parties. The stylist described fearing for his safety after Coombs searched his home looking for Ventura. Nash then testified that Ventura often felt pressured to attend parties she did not want to join. The trial also heard from police and fire officials about an arson attack on rapper Kid Cudi's car, allegedly linking it to Coombs' circle. Coombs denies all charges, including racketeering and sex trafficking. Nash will now return to the stand tomorrow, followed by Coombs' former assistant. We stay in the US, where President Donald Trump has confirmed that he advised Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against launching a military strike on Iran. Speaking on Wednesday, Trump said he made the request during a recent phone call, citing ongoing diplomatic efforts between Washington and Tehran. Trump described the talks as very good and indicated that a potential agreement may be near, stating that a deal could save a lot of lives. He emphasized that any military action at this time would be inappropriate given the sensitive nature of the negotiations. Although he did not rule out the possibility of using military force in the future, Trump reiterated that Israel would take the lead in any such action. Meanwhile, Iran has signaled willingness to allow UN nuclear inspectors access if a deal is met with the US. We now stay in the Middle East, where Iran has executed Pedram Mandani for spying for Israel, despite family and activist pleas. Mandani, who was 41 years old, was hanged in the Jizl Sar prison near Tehran after being held since 2019. Human rights groups say his trial was unfair, denying him a lawyer of his choice and relying on forced confessions. This is the second execution for spying for Israel, but within 2 months, amid a surge in executions across Iran, which activists claim aims to instill fear in society. The government accuses him of passing secrets and meeting Mossad agents. Activists condemn the penalty, saying it is used to suppress dissent and cover systemic issues. Over 480 executions have occurred in Iran this year, including many for political charges. We stay in the Indo-Pacific, where French President Emmanuel Macron has arrived in Yogyakarta, which is a special administrative region located on the island of Java in Indonesia. He was welcomed at the airport by Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. The two leaders greeted each other warmly before boarding a helicopter to visit a military academy. Macron's visit comes as France and Indonesia sign a preliminary defence pact. Prabowo called France a key partner in upgrading Indonesia's military. Macron arrived from Vietnam earlier this week and will fly to Singapore next week. US President Donald Trump has secured a legal victory in his defamation lawsuit against the Pulitzer Prize Board. The Florida 4th District Court of Appeals ruled that the case can proceed, rejecting the board's request to dismiss it. Trump filed the lawsuit in 2022, alleging the Pulitzer Prize for National Reporting awarded to the New York Times and the Washington Post in 2018 was based on false reporting regarding alleged Russian interference in the 2016 US election and its connections to his campaign. The court's decision allows Trump to continue his legal challenge against the Pulitzer Prize board. South Koreans are turning out in record numbers as early voting begins in a snap presidential election triggered by months of political chaos. The vote, set for June the 3rd, follows former President Yoon Suk-yeol's attempts to impose martial law, a move that led to his impeachment and a national crisis. Leading candidate Lee Jae-myung of the Democratic Party cast his vote in Seoul, urging voters to start again as a career of recovery and growth. His remarks come as the Bank of Korea slashes the country's growth outlook to just 0.8% for 2025. The upcoming vote is being closely watched as South Koreans hope to put months of turmoil behind them and restore stability to one of Asia's largest economies. US Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau met with Indian Foreign Ministry Vikram Misri in Washington today, reaffirming the strategic depth of the US-India partnership. Landau called the relationship a historic zenith and a pillar of 21st century foreign policy. Both sides discussed expanding fair and reciprocal trade, tackling illegal immigration and boosting counter-narcotics cooperation. The two officials also reiterated their commitment to regional stability and peace. Landau posted on X, calling the working lunch a success and praising India as a crucial ally. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has outlined a 5-point consensus reached with Pacific leaders in a China-Pacific Island countries meeting on May the 28th. The Foreign Minister addressed the outline during a press conference with Kiribati's President and Foreign Minister Teneti Maiamu in Xiamen. The meeting took place in Xiamen in eastern China's Fujian province. As per Wang, this session of the China-PICS meeting was the first to be held face-to-face in China since its establishment in 2021. He stated that he and other foreign ministers at the meeting talked in depth about advancing bilateral cooperation and international and regional issues of common concern, reaching a consensus in 5 key areas. We now move over to Africa, where a new cholera outbreak in Sudan has killed 172 people and sickened more than 2,500 over the past week, according to authorities. Medical groups have also reportedly warned that the country's existing health facilities were unable to cope with the surge of patients. This comes as a recent UNICEF report highlighted the growing threat of cholera in Sudan, with more than 7,700 cases and 185 associated deaths reported in Khartoum state alone since January 2025. Alarmingly, over 1,000 cases have affected children under the age of 5. Since the onset of the conflict in April 2023, 3 million people have been forced to flee their homes, displaced internally and across the region. While improved access to parts of Khartoum state has been enabled, more than 34,000 people to return since January. Many are coming back to homes that they have been severely damaged and lack access to basic water and sanitation services. Recent attacks on power infrastructure in Khartoum state have compounded the crisis, disrupting water supplies and forcing families to collect water from unsafe and contaminated sources. Moreover, Doctors Without Borders has warned that sexual violence is near a constant risk for women and girls in Sudan's western region of Darfur, and called for urgent action to protect civilians and provide support for survivors. Between January 2024 and March of 2025, MSF said it had treated 659 survivors of violence in South Darfur, 94% of them women and girls. More than half of them were assaulted by armed actors and nearly a third were minors. Some victims were as young as 5. We stay in the African continent now, where African literary giant Ngugi Wa Thiong'o has died at the age of 87. A towering figure in modern African literature, Ngugi spent 6 decades chronicling Kenya's journey from colonial rule to independence, often at great personal cost. Jailed without trial for his political writing and exiled for over 2 decades, he never stopped fighting for the power of African languages in literature. His debut novel, Weep Not, Child, was the first English language novel published by an East African, but he later abandoned English entirely, vowing to write only in Kikuyu, even in prison. He wrote on toilet paper. His books, including Devil on the Cross and Petals of Blood, remain foundational texts in post-colonial literature. Ngugi Wa Thiong'o leaves behind a legacy that will resonate for generations. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.